Holy shit. He said what?
Everybody trying to be a victim. Like, what's this girl, Meghan Markle? Seemed like a nice lady, just complaining. I was like, didn't she hit the light skin lottery? And still going on complaining, acting all dumb like she don't know nothing. Going on Oprah, I didn't know. I had no idea how racist they were. It's the royal family. You didn't Google these motherfuckers?
For years, Meghan Markle and Prince Harry were supposed to become Hollywood's next unstoppable power couple. They had global fame, royal connections, massive media deals, and millions of people already interested in every move they made. Netflix gave them a platform. Spotify opened another door. Books, documentaries, interviews, podcasts, and lifestyle projects followed. On paper, it looked like Meghan and Harry had everything they needed to build a media empire. But somewhere along the way, the conversation changed. Instead of asking how successful their next project would be, people started asking what had gone wrong. The ratings became part of the discussion. The reviews became part of the discussion. And eventually, something even more interesting happened. Comedians started making them the punchline. From Jimmy Carr to Chris Rock and outspoken celebrities like Kelly Osbourne, Meghan and Harry increasingly found themselves at the center of jokes, criticism, and public debate. So how did one of the world's most famous couples go from being seen as Hollywood's next big thing to becoming a regular subject of comedy? And was their Hollywood dream really failing? Or were expectations simply so enormous that nothing they did could ever satisfy everyone? The promise of a new beginning. To understand why the jokes started landing, you have to go back to the beginning, when Meghan Markle and Prince Harry stepped away from their roles as senior working members of the royal family and began building a new life in California. The attention was immediate. This was not an ordinary celebrity career move. Prince Harry was one of the most recognizable members of the British royal family, while Meghan Markle was already internationally known from her acting career and from becoming part of one of the most famous families in the world. Together, they had something very few celebrity couples could ever possess: global attention. And in the entertainment industry, attention has enormous value. Major deals followed. Netflix became one of the biggest platforms connected to their new future. Spotify entered the picture. There were plans for documentaries, podcasts, entertainment projects, books, and other media ventures. The message seemed clear. Harry and Meghan were leaving behind one chapter of their lives and building something completely new. They were no longer going to depend on the traditional royal system. They were going to create their own brand, their own businesses, and their own media empire. But that enormous opportunity also created an enormous problem. Expectations became almost impossible to manage. When an unknown creator launches a new show, people may simply ask whether it is entertaining. But when two of the most famous people in the world sign major deals with companies like Netflix and Spotify, the public expects something much bigger. People do not just expect a decent project, they expect a cultural moment. And that gap between expectation and reality would eventually become the center of almost every criticism surrounding Meghan and Harry's Hollywood journey. Meghan's new direction. One of the biggest questions surrounding Meghan was what exactly her new public identity would become. She had already been an actress. She had become a duchess. She had taken part in interviews and documentaries. But what would come next? When Meghan entered the lifestyle space, the public immediately became curious. Would she become a major lifestyle personality? Would her projects establish a completely new phase of her career? Or would audiences see it as another celebrity project, built mainly around an already famous name? When her lifestyle series arrived, the reaction was mixed. Some viewers enjoyed the relaxed atmosphere. They saw it as light entertainment, focused on food, hosting, everyday activities, and personal stories. Others were much less impressed. Critics questioned whether the format offered anything particularly new. Online viewers began focusing on individual moments, small conversations, cooking segments, and exchanges that they considered overly polished, awkward, or unintentionally funny. And this is where Meghan's celebrity status created a unique problem. A small moment that might have gone unnoticed if it involved an unknown television host could suddenly become a viral clip when Meghan Markle was involved. A misunderstanding, a particular phrase, a lifestyle tip, or a conversation about everyday life could quickly travel across social media. The internet did what it always does. Individual moments became clips. Clips became memes. Memes became jokes. And before long, the reaction surrounding the show became almost as important as the show itself. For Meghan's supporters, much of the criticism appeared excessive. They argued that every word and every movement was being analyzed simply because of who she was. But critics saw those same moments as evidence that the project was disconnected from ordinary audiences. And once those two interpretations existed, the public debate became almost impossible to control. The question of results, another issue, quickly became part of the conversation. Performance. Commentators began examining streaming rankings, public reactions, and reports surrounding Meghan's projects. Critics argued that the results did not match the enormous expectations surrounding her entry into the entertainment and lifestyle world. Supporters pushed back against that interpretation. They pointed out that success cannot always be measured by a single ranking or number. Not every project is designed to become one of the biggest shows on a streaming platform. Different systems measure audiences differently, and public attention itself can be a form of success. But critics had already developed a much simpler narrative. The expectations had been massive. The publicity had been massive. The deals had been massive. So they argued, shouldn't the results also have been massive? That question followed Meghan and Harry through almost everything they did. The situation became even more complicated when people began comparing Meghan's new projects with Suits, the television series that helped make her famous. Years after its original release, Suits experienced a major resurgence in popularity. Suddenly, the show associated with Meghan's earlier acting career was receiving enormous attention again. For critics, the comparison was irresistible. Meghan's old show was becoming a major talking point, while her newer projects were being judged against the huge expectations created by her Hollywood reinvention. And for comedians, comparisons like that are easy material. They do not need to explain every detail. The audience already understands the story. That is one of the main reasons Meghan and Harry eventually became such recognizable subjects for comedy. Their history was already known. The public knew about their departure from royal duties. They knew about the Netflix deal. They knew about Spotify. They knew about the interviews, documentaries, books, and public controversies. A comedian only had to mention a few details, and the audience could fill in the rest. When comedy entered the story, Jimmy Carr was one of the comedians who entered this broader conversation. His comedy style is built around short, sharp observations and controversial subjects, and few modern stories have contained as many contradictions and public debates as the story of Harry and Meghan. The British royal family has always been a source of comedy. For decades, comedians have joked about royal traditions, family scandals, controversial relationships, and the strange mixture of history, ceremony, and celebrity surrounding the monarchy. But Harry and Meghan introduced a new element into that story. They were royals, but they were also celebrities. They wanted independence, but they remained internationally famous, partly because of the institution they had stepped away from. They wanted more control over their public image, but their lives continued to become the subject of documentaries, interviews, books, podcasts, and media coverage. For comedians, that combination created endless material. At times, the royal family itself was compared to Britain's version of a celebrity reality show. The joke worked because modern audiences already understand how the monarchy has become part of global entertainment culture. Family disagreements can become headlines. Interviews can dominate news cycles. Personal relationships can become international stories. And Harry, in particular, became an easy figure for comedians to discuss. He was the prince who left, the royal who moved to California, the family member who wrote a memoir, the man who participated in major interviews and documentaries, while also speaking about the pressure of media attention. Whether people agreed with his decisions or not, there was already a recognizable public story. Comedians did not need to invent one. They simply exaggerated what the public was already discussing. The privacy contradiction. One of the biggest themes used by critics involved privacy. Harry and Meghan have spoken publicly about the pressure of media attention and the need to establish boundaries around their personal lives. Their supporters argue that this is entirely reasonable. Being famous does not mean a person should have no privacy, but critics saw a contradiction. At the same time that the couple spoke about wanting privacy, they also participated in documentaries, major interviews, books, podcasts, and other projects that involved sharing parts of their personal story, and this became perfect material for satire. The basic joke was simple. How do you ask to be left alone while continuing to remain one of the most visible couples in entertainment? Of course, reality is more complicated than the joke. A person can want privacy while still choosing to share selected parts of their life. Wanting boundaries does not mean disappearing completely from public life, but comedy does not usually operate through complicated explanations. Comedy works by identifying contradictions and making them larger. And whether fair or unfair, Harry and Meghan's relationship with privacy became one of the easiest contradictions for critics and comedians to use. Animated satire and television comedy also joined the conversation. The image of a famous couple living in California, surrounded by celebrity culture, trying to escape media attention while remaining at the center of major headlines, became a familiar comedic idea. The details changed from one joke to another, but the central image remained the same. Harry and Meghan could leave the royal family. They could move across the world. They could start new businesses, but they could not escape public attention. The Spotify problem. Then came another major chapter, Spotify. The partnership originally appeared to be another huge opportunity. Podcasting was growing rapidly, celebrity content was becoming increasingly valuable, and Meghan's public profile seemed perfectly suited to the format. Her podcast eventually arrived, but the partnership did not continue indefinitely. Only a limited number of episodes were released before the collaboration came to an end. Immediately, critics connected this development to the larger narrative surrounding Meghan and Harry's Hollywood journey. Big announcement, huge expectations, then a partnership that ended. Supporters argued that this was not unusual. Entertainment deals change, companies change strategy. Not every project continues forever, but critics saw it as another part of a larger pattern. And once the public starts believing that a pattern exists, every new event becomes connected to it. Netflix was no longer just Netflix. Spotify was no longer just Spotify. Each project became part of one larger question. Had Meghan and Harry actually built the independent media empire that people originally expected? Or had the enormous promise of their new beginning been greater than the results? That question became the foundation of much of the criticism that followed. Kelly Osbourne's criticism. This is where public figures like Kelly Osbourne entered the discussion. Osbourne offered a blunt opinion about Harry and Meghan's post-royal journey. From her perspective, the couple had received extraordinary opportunities, major platforms, major contracts, global attention, and she questioned whether the results had justified those opportunities. That was her opinion, not an established fact, but her comments attracted attention because they reflected a criticism that had already been circulating for years. What exactly had Harry and Meghan built with all the advantages available to them? Supporters strongly disagreed with that interpretation. They argued that the couple had produced successful projects, maintained worldwide attention, and created careers outside the traditional royal structure. But the debate continued because success can be measured in different ways. Some people look at rating, others look at revenue, others look at influence, others look at cultural relevance. And Harry and Meghan remained culturally relevant, whether people loved them or criticized them. In fact, that may have been the most interesting part of the entire story. Even when a project received mixed reviews, people were still talking about it. And in the entertainment industry, attention itself has value. Why they remain impossible to ignore. Every time Meghan launches something new, the same cycle begins. Supporters become excited. Critics become skeptical. Commentators begin analyzing every detail. Social media users create clips and memes. And the entertainment media starts asking whether this new project will finally change the larger narrative. Harry and Meghan may be one of the most divisive celebrity couples in the world, and being divisive can create enormous attention. A celebrity who receives universal admiration can. Supporters saw it differently. They argued that Harry and Meghan were responding to an ongoing media environment and had the right to tell their side of the story. But critics believed that constantly returning to the same subjects was preventing the couple from creating a completely new identity. And this is where the situation becomes particularly complicated. Harry and Meghan wanted to build a life beyond the royal family, but the royal family remained one of the biggest reasons the public was interested in them. When Meghan launched a lifestyle project, people compared it to her royal life. When Harry gave an interview, the conversation returned to his family. When a business deal changed, people connected it to their decision to leave Britain. When a comedian made a joke, the entire royal history returned to the discussion. So how do you move beyond a story when that story is the reason millions of people became interested in you? That may be the central problem of Harry and Meghan's post-royal journey. They can create something completely new, but the public will often judge it through the lens of what came before. A different standard. Another reason the criticism can be so intense is that Harry and Meghan are not judged like ordinary entertainers. They entered Hollywood with enormous advantages: worldwide fame, recognition, connections, financial resources, a built-in global audience. That is why the expectations were so high. An unknown creator can release a project to a small audience and still call it an important step forward. But when one of the world's most famous couples signs major deals with major companies, every result is examined more closely. That does not mean every project has to become a global record breaker, but it explains why disappointing reactions, negative reviews, or changing business partnerships attract so much attention. The higher the expectations, the more noticeable the disappointment can become. And for Meghan, the challenge became even greater because the public reaction itself often overshadowed the actual project. A negative review might be forgotten, but a funny clip can travel around the world. A small moment can become a meme. A meme can become a punchline, and suddenly, people who never watched the original project are discussing it. That is the power of internet culture. The Netflix question attention eventually returned once again to Meghan and Harry's relationship with Netflix. For years, their partnership had been described as one of the most significant celebrity arrangements in streaming. Naturally, speculation grew about what would happen as the original phase of that relationship developed. Reports and discussions suggested that the nature of the partnership could change or evolve. Supporters argued that this was completely normal in entertainment. Business relationships change. Production strategies change. New agreements can look different from earlier ones. Critics, however, saw something else. They argued that it was another example of the enormous expectations surrounding Harry and Meghan not being fully realized. And once again, the public debate came down to interpretation. Were Meghan and Harry adapting their strategy, or were the results simply not strong enough to justify the expectations created at the beginning? There was no single answer everyone agreed on, but the debate continued. And while the debate continued, comedians continued watching. Why the jokes keep working? One of the reasons comedy works so effectively with Harry and Meghan is that comedians do not need to prove a complicated argument. They are not presenting financial reports. They are not negotiating contracts. They are not producing formal reviews. They are reacting to public perception. If the audience recognizes the reference, the joke works. And in Harry and Meghan's case, the audience recognizes almost everything. The Netflix deal, the Spotify partnership, the privacy debate, the interviews, the documentaries, the memoir, the royal family, California, the lifestyle projects, the constant headlines, all of it has become part of a shared cultural memory. That is why a comedian can mention only one or two details and still receive an immediate reaction. The audience already knows the rest. Harry and William. Another interesting part of the story is the difference between Harry and his brother, Prince William, in the public comedy narrative. Harry often appears to provide more obvious material because his life after leaving royal duties has been publicly documented through interviews, books, documentaries, and media projects. He is the brother who left, the brother who wrote a memoir, the brother who moved to California, the brother who openly discussed family conflicts. That naturally makes him easier for comedians to discuss. Prince William occupies a different position in the public story. Harry's. In the end, this story is not really about one Netflix show, one Spotify deal, one interview, or one comedian. It is about what happens when two of the most recognizable people in the world attempt to reinvent themselves in public. Harry left the royal family. Meghan left behind one version of her public identity. They moved to California. Major companies signed major deals. Documentaries were released. Interviews created controversy. A memoir became part of the global conversation. Business partnerships changed. Lifestyle projects arrived, and through every stage, the world kept watching. That is why the jokes started landing. The comedians did not create the story from nothing. They stepped into a conversation that had already been developing for years. Jimmy Carr used royal history and celebrity culture. Chris Rock brought his own perspective to the controversy. Kelly Osbourne questioned whether the opportunities given to the couple had produced the expected results. Other commentators focused on Netflix, Spotify, privacy, media appearances, and Meghan's lifestyle projects. Fair or unfair, all of these reactions became part of the larger Harry and Meghan story. But there is another side to it. Comedy exaggerates. Critics have their own biases. Online clips can remove context. And Meghan and Harry's supporters believe that the couple is often judged more harshly than other celebrities. From their perspective, every small mistake becomes a major controversy simply because of who Meghan and Harry are. And perhaps that is why the debate has lasted so long. Harry and Meghan have not become irrelevant. In fact, the opposite may be true. Their ability to generate conversation remains extraordinary. The real question is whether one future project can finally change the narrative. Can Meghan create a project that people discuss without immediately connecting it to the royal family? Can Harry build a public identity that is not constantly defined by his departure from it? Can the couple create something so successful that the conversation finally becomes about the work instead of the controversy? Maybe. But until that happens, the same cycle will probably continue. A new project will arrive. Supporters will celebrate it. Critics will analyze it. Social media will create clips. Commentators will offer opinions. And comedians will look for the next punchline. Because Meghan Markle and Prince Harry are no longer simply part of a royal story. They have become permanent figures in modern celebrity culture. And as long as the public keeps watching, the jokes will keep coming. The biggest question now is not whether Meghan and Harry can attract attention. They already can. The question is whether they can create something that finally makes everyone talk about their success, instead of everything that came before it.